either used or not used. There was, debates as to, how we protecting, your data with the mobile money, your data with the mobile companies and with banks. At least we put in now the right infrastructure and policies and laws. That goes with also the cybersecurity and privacy laws that we have already enacted and in place. But we have gone further, and we now have our cybersecurity teams that are ensuring that we're protecting our citizens, not only their data, but also the infrastructure. For instance, KRA data centers, ensuring that people are not accessing and hacking into the systems. That is very critical. The CG of Rwanda just mentioned that is, in this new normal, where technology is being used all the time, then we must really ensure we protect the infrastructure that we've put in place, and more so for human resource. What information are they able to give, and how is that information managed? Making sure we are educating and creating the necessary awareness for the protection of both the systems and also the citizens. So we've trained also the police, the investigative agencies, the judiciary, so that they're all involved, so that if people are found misbehaving in these systems, then they're taken care of in the right methodologies. This new normal is actually quite a change. It's a transformative change. Today, as you can see, we are connected to Cape Town, we're connected to Rwanda, and even here, and with all the people who are watching globally, this summit. So it means many things can happen even in between. And so just ensuring that we're protecting everybody. So a lot of investment is happening.
I think a quick comment from you on protection of minors, because I think that has been a big issue that has come to the front. How are minors being protected in the cyber world?
Yes, I was, because they don't pay taxes. That's why I left. That's why I left.
They're future taxpayers.
In fact, recently with the Communications Authority and the First Lady, we launched our second campaign in just getting parents and now the actual minors, the students, the youth to be able to protect themselves, wakae chonjo, so that they know how people either will use phishing methods to get information out of them, lure them to different places. So that kind of protection and creating the awareness is something that we are constantly doing. I think the media has been very good in terms of providing the necessary support and ensuring that citizens are aware of many of these areas of problems. We're working with the service providers, whether it's the mobile operators or internet service providers, to ensure that they are continuously informing their customers about the issues and challenges that could come from just going online. So that is an area we are working very hard on and continuously informing. And at the same time, ensuring that the parents and guardians are also very well informed. I mentioned that the law enforcement and judiciary are also very chonjo. So we have, labs and all other infrastructure that's been brought up to speed so that we can be able to ensure if there's any forensic required to deal with whether it's a kidnap, whether it is ransomware or whatever it is, we are able to deal with that effectively.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. CS. I'm looking at my clock and this is such an amazing discussion, but time is not on our side. So allow me to take us through our closing remarks for this plenary session. Allow me to start with Mr. Kisveta, the Commissioner for South Africa Revenue Services. And as you give us your quick closing remarks in 2 minutes, there's a question here for you. What is the future of work from home? That's a question for you. What's your perspective as you give us your quick closing remarks, Mr. Kisveta? Unmute, please.
Thank you, Madam Director. I don't think we know the answer. I think we are learning as we evolve to what we consider to be a hybrid situation. We have been very clear that our default place of work remains a SARS office, but we will enable all of our staff to be able to work remotely, and we will manage the reality on the ground as it evolves. So I envisage, firstly, a hybrid situation where we will have people who work at our offices and at home on rotation or driven by personal circumstances or other factors. Secondly, I see increasingly the kind of work we will do will move away from being the primary interface with taxpayers to assisting taxpayers, but being augmented increasingly by automation, by augmentation, by data insights, and by technology. So it also places an enormous obligation on us to rapidly transform the skills of our staff. And the last point that I want to make is having clarity of what that journey would look like. We still have to deal with the psychosocial impact of what it means for people to be disconnected from a physical, practical, and in-person community of work to sitting at the other end of a device and yet be part of a community of practice or common interests. We are learning about that. I would not sit here and say we have it worked out to a pat.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kisveta. And on to Commissioner General of Rwanda Revenue Authority, Mr. Rugani Twali. I have a question here for you, a quick one, as you give us your closing remarks as well. And this one asks, what have been the risks and opportunities for RRA in adopting to changes in terms of management of the workforce, revenue collection, and service delivery? I think revenue collection, you've alluded to it, that you actually surpassed your targets, Mr. Commissioner General, so that's a good thing. But what about service delivery and management of your workforce?
I thank you. You know, during the pandemic period and the lockdown especially, we were able to use only 30% of our workforce, meaning that the remaining staff were to work remotely. And it was not really easy to monitor and provide all necessary equipment or tool to avail to the staff. But I can say that it was a success to us, as we tried on limited time to provide with VPN facility, meaning that this virtual private network to each staff working remotely to make sure that our network is protected. And this really made difference because staff could provide remotely services even to taxpayers. But also to the taxpayers, we really try to avail staff with their telephones so that at any time a taxpayer can reach a staff for needed services. So the service during the COVID, I can say that also was a success, as long as staff were really enough motivated to provide such service, knowing that we were in hard periods. And I can say that during the COVID, we really tried to build team, even though we were not working together. So closing my remark, I think it is a fact. It is a fact. Lesson learned compel a paradigm shift by investing in the new work processes. And there is two prerequisites. One, investing in automation and data analytics. The second one is mindset shifts through regular awareness and support, both to staff and taxpayers. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner General. We appreciate that. Quickly off to Mr. Onyango from Institute of Human Resource Management. What is the one thing we can look forward to from IHRM? Mr. Onyango, as you give us your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I think the one thing you can look out to from IHRM is that we are very keen to implement what the COVID-19 processes are, has taught us. Number one is that we are going to go back to reevaluating the jobs, because previously, you remember, there was so much emphasis on certain skills, which now today we are saying may not be as important as we thought they would be. And we have to design our jobs, redesign the thinking about our career progression plan, and also most importantly, look out, for example, during recruitments or when you are actually doing talent acquisition, what are these things that you are going to emphasize on? We are going back to the basics of looking at people's dependability, people's attitude, people's ability to adapt very quickly, honesty and integrity, because then these are the things that allow employers to ensure that performance can be sustained without direct supervision or someone hanging behind your back to ensure that you are working. Thank you very much.
All right, and we wish you success in that journey. It's going to be an interesting one, Mr. Onyango. Dr. Kinu, there's a long question here for you. I tell you, the questions are coming. Maybe you could answer in very few seconds. It is evident that COVID-19 has changed how things are done, more use of technology to achieve dependable service delivery. How is KRA prepared to this end to achieve inclusiveness of the marginalized communities? So you could respond that as you give us your closing remarks, Dr.
In terms of the diversity of who we are, which I started with, be it from age, from region, from ethnicity, from nationals, we are one cosmopolitan organization, and we pride ourselves in, because in there, we are able to harness the abilities of everyone. And be it to the person in the far-fetched corner of this country, one of the things that you'll find happening in KRA is the issue of technology inclusion and awareness, as perhaps manifested, if you look at our contact centers, we are spread across 52 locations in this country. So we are able then, using technology inclusion and awareness, to bring any part of the country to be part of KRA. My closing remark, I think COVID has presented an opportunity of an emergence of a new study stream of how a resilience workforce responding to a call of good leadership is able to ride waves of adversity to continue offering right customer service to its citizens. And that's something that for us as leaders, as scholars, we shall be studying in the couple of years to come.
Excellent. I like how you've put it. I cannot even repeat it. I wish it was quoted somewhere. Thank you very much, Dr. Kinu. Truly appreciate your words of wisdom. And finally, our CS, I have a question here for you. How will your Ministry of ICT support KRA to enhance revenue collection in light of the digital acceleration and more business being done digitally? As you give us your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I believe first, one of the great things I'm seeing, getting here, you look at all the infrastructure that is being built, the expressway, the railways, there's so much that is going on. What is not seen by citizens is the software. And you can now see that here at KRA in terms of staff, in terms of the amount of input and effort that has been put in to ensure that the workforce is taken care of and that the quality of work for them is actually being done well. So I think that's a great part. And really our role within the government and within the ministry is to ensure we're providing the necessary infrastructure, whether it is the connectivity, whether it is the security that is needed, the devices that are needed, the training that is required, so that the workforce is able to work well and be able to deliver for us as a citizenry and even as a government. So that's the role that we have as a ministry and as a government, to ensure that the right infrastructure is with the right people and that it is up to date and modern. The connectivity we are talking about across the whole country. Right now, we've reached all sub-counties with fiber, and that continues. We're moving to the hospitals and so on. So we want to do that, and the Revenue Authority is going to be in all those places in ensuring that everybody is complying and at the same time receiving the necessary information so that it's easy. You don't have to go so far to be able to file your taxes. So we'll continue with that. And really, in terms of my closing remarks, is that I am really happy to see the kind of adoption technology that is being used not just here in Kenya, but across the continent. And to say that Kenya is in a position where we can now leverage the rest of the region, the continental free trade area, to make sure that the businesses that we're building can be able to go across the borders, take advantage of the 1.3 billion market in Africa, which is huge. Some companies are already going to Ethiopia, others, to our neighbors. And KRA can help actually in these companies moving to those areas, providing them with the necessary information. And those of us who are online, giving us more clarity, whether we need to pay any taxes on Bitcoin that we've mined or not. But that maybe is a discussion for another time, because I think we have not recognized it yet as currency or as commodity. So right now, people, it moved from $200. Now we are at 55,000 one.
Oh, wow.
So that's an area maybe you can look at taxing, but a different story for another day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. CS. A round of applause for plenary 2 speakers and panelists. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Would like to transition into plenary 3. Mr. CS and Dr. Kinu, if you could come to the front, would like to take a picture with you, with our Commissioner General and our KRA Board Chair as the plenary 2 discussants. Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner General. Thank you, Mr. KRA Board Chair, Ambassador Francis Muthaura. Let's keep the conversations going as the photos are going on. We are Tax Summit 2021. That's the hashtag on Twitter. We are on Facebook, and we are at KRA Corporate. Let's continue having the conversations. And on the Zoom platform, we are taking your questions. So keep using the Q&A chat box on Zoom. Thank you very much, our chairman. Thank you, our Commissioner General. Thank you, our CS. Thank you very much, our Commissioner Corporate Support Services, and our Commissioner from SARS, Commissioner General from RRA, and Mr. Onyango. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished delegates, we are now into plenary 3 and the third plenary of the day, very engaging. This is the one you have been waiting for. It's about the national tax policy. Yes, we're going to be talking about economic growth and diversification and the Agenda 2063. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to now welcome, joining us all the way from Singapore is Madam Chia Tan Hui Min, the Deputy Commissioner, Internal Investigation and Indirect Taxes from the Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore. We're going to be talking about the national tax policy, and they're going to be giving us an experience from Singapore. Madam Chia Tan, if you can hear me.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm not able to activate my video because it's centrally controlled. Okay, yeah, the rights have been given to me now. Thank you very much for this invitation. May I begin?
Yes, please go ahead, madam.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to Nairobi, to Kenya. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here today. On behalf of the Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore. My topic is the role of taxation in economic diversification and growth. I am honored that Singapore is chosen as a case example of a country that has successfully implemented a taxation regime that supports diversified economies. Let me start with the role of tax in Singapore's economic history. Singapore is a very small island city-state. We have a land area of only about 730 square kilometers and a population of around 5.4 million. Our economic landscape has evolved and transformed over the years. While maintaining the fundamental principles of progressivity and fairness, our tax policies have also been continually adapted to mobilize revenue in a changing economic environment. As an island state, we have no natural resources and we don't have a hinterland. So our economic survival depends on being part of an open integrated network with other nations. Singapore became independent in 1965. In our early development during 1960s to 70s, We went against conventional economic wisdom, and we shifted from import substitution in favor of export-led industrialization, and we worked with global companies to achieve industrial growth. These were the beginnings of our tax policies that were formulated to anchor and to grow substantive economic activities in the manufacturing sector. And we focus on promoting exports and creating jobs. With this, we saw the manufacturing share of a GDP going from 14% in 1965 to 22% in 1975. In the next decade, during 1980s to 1990s, it became clear that Singapore needed to move up the value chain towards more capital-intensive and skill-intensive activities. And here is where we adjusted our tax incentives to move away from labor-intensive industries to support larger, higher value-added activities. This policy enabled us to build strong clusters of industries in electronics, in petrochemicals, manufacturing of components, precision engineering. And so by 1980, Singapore became the world's leading producer of hard disk drives. However, in 1985, we were also faced with an economic recession, which pushed us to fundamentally review our economic policies and strategies and to take decisive actions to move towards an innovation-led and knowledge-based economy. From the 90s to 2000, Singapore's fiscal and manpower policies focus on promoting entrepreneurship, high value added manufacturing, as well as service sectors such as financial services, business services, and infocom. These policies encourage companies to make investments in technology to raise productivity and put in place programs that help Singaporeans develop and master skills in new growth areas. Today, Singapore has a highly diversified economy and continues to be powered by the twin engines of manufacturing and services, with manufacturing comprising about 21.5% of our GDP. Now, our economy continues to evolve in tandem with the global economy, and there are new challenges, new opportunities and headwinds that face us today. The pandemic has also tested the resilience of our systems and make us think harder about the need for tax and financial management reforms that allow us to mobilize revenue for a sustainable and equitable recovery. The pandemic is still unfolding against the backdrop of other major shifts, such as climate change, aging population, and the digitalization of our economy. Hence, it is now more pressing than before that we should modernize our systems to build resilience and sustainability in the midst of change and uncertainty. Now, our tax regime is based on being fair, progressive, and pro-growth. I will outline the 5 key thrusts of Singapore's tax regime and tax policies to illustrate this. The first thrust, which is funding government spending in a sustainable and resilient manner. So firstly, Singapore aims to fund government spending in a sustainable and resilient manner. We have diversified our tax revenue base over the years to include both direct taxes and indirect taxes, which includes the goods and services tax. So we have a balanced mix of income and consumption taxes, which reduces the vulnerability of our revenue due to adverse changes in economic conditions. And it also strengthens our resilience, the resilience of our fiscal position. Government spending is projected to increase, particularly in healthcare, in infrastructure, in security, and other social spending. The Singapore government has therefore announced the plan to increase our GST rate by 2 percentage points from 7% to 9% sometime between 2022 and 2025. To cushion the impact of this increase, the government will institute transitional support packages and schemes to defray GST expenses for the lower and middle income households. Our GST tax base has broadened because we introduced GST to imported services in 2020. This ensures that our tax system remains fair and resilient and achieves parity in GST treatment for all services consumed in Singapore, whether imported from overseas or generated from Singapore or produced from Singapore. So in 2020, the 2 regimes introduced under GST are first, a reverse charge regime for business-to-business supplies of imported services, and it includes all services, whether digital or non-digital, such as consultancy and marketing services. And we also have what we call an overseas vendor registration regime for B2C supplies of imported digital services. And here is what we refer to as digitalized services consumed by individuals, such as music and video streaming. In addition, this year, in January this year, Singapore will extend our reverse charge and our overseas vendor. Well, we announced this year that we will extend the reverse charge and overseas vendor registration system to introduce GST to be imposed on low-value goods which are imported via air or post, and also B2C supplies of imported non-digital services, such as live interaction with overseas providers of education training. And this will take effect in 1st January 2023, and we have given this early announcement because it takes time for businesses to get ready for the new tax system, or rather for the expansion of GST coverage. The extension of GST to such imported goods and services complements the existing GST measures on B2B imported services and B2C imported digital services. So together, they will ensure a level playing field for our local businesses to remain competitive. And the overseas suppliers of goods and services will then be subject to the same GST treatment as the local suppliers. And this change will keep our GST system fair and resilient in a growing digital economy. Second thrust of our tax policy is to encourage enterprise and growth. We have built a conducive environment where businesses at various stages of growth can use Singapore as a base, as a site to build deep capabilities to grow and to internationalize. Our tax policies are designed to support substantive economic activities in order to create skilled jobs and to build new and enduring capabilities in Singapore. We have also invested heavily in quality infrastructure, good education, and continuous skills upgrading to grow a highly skilled and adaptive workforce. To support global businesses in Singapore, we have been continually expanding our treaty network. And for treaties in force, we have now more than 80 agreements for the avoidance of double taxation. Our third thrust of tax policy is to keep overall taxes and transfers progressive. The overall system, we keep it progressive. So we have an overall progressive system of taxes and transfers. As an illustration, in 2020, the top 20% of Singaporean households paid nearly 60% of the taxes and received about 10% of the benefits. Whereas if we look at the bottom 20% of the Singaporean households, they paid less than 10% of the taxes and received almost 30% of the benefits. So to ensure progressivity, we have instituted schemes that offset GST expenses for lower and middle income households. We now have a progressive system of property taxes and buyer's stamp duty as well. The fourth objective of our tax policy is to support social objectives. Tax has long been used in Singapore to support and encourage positive social activity objectives, or to discourage certain activities, such as high taxes and duties on liquor, cigarettes, and tobacco, high taxes on motor vehicles. On the other hand, there are tax reliefs to encourage philanthropy, to encourage procreation. Fifth, ensuring tax certainty is a very key objective of our tax policy and system. We believe that tax certainty underpins any resilient and sustainable tax regime for businesses. Businesses in Singapore have the confidence to plan their investments in advance, in part due to our political stability and also due to our commitment to provide clarity and certainty in tax rules. We provide tax certainty by giving clear guidance to businesses on the tax rules. We also have a system of advanced tax rulings where businesses can seek early certainty on anticipated business arrangements. And we proactively seek feedback from businesses to identify how and where tax rules should be updated to reflect changes in business environment. Singapore is an active member of the international tax community. We participate actively in ongoing discussions at the Inclusive Framework on pillars, both the BEPS pillars 1 and 2. And we are also very active at the Global Forum for Tax Transparency and Information Exchange. We adhere to internationally accepted standards in BEPS and in tax transparency. And we have implemented all the 4 minimum standards under BEPS 1.0. This includes countering harmful tax practices, preventing treaty abuse, implementing country-by-country reporting, and enhancing dispute resolution. The FHTP, or the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices, has assessed Singapore's tax incentives, and they satisfy the international standards on countering harmful tax practices under the BEPS project. And we have achieved good review outcomes for the other BEPS minimum standards as well. Now, to provide tax certainty in cross-border trade, we are committed to helping taxpayers to resolve tax disputes in a consistent and principled manner in accordance with internationally accepted rules. Singapore has adopted mandatory binding provision under the MLI, that's the multilateral instrument. And the mandatory binding arbitration will provide an alternative dispute mechanism if competent authorities are not able to reach an agreement or they can't do so in a timely manner. It has been the experience of other countries that mandatory arbitration helps prevent the failure of mutual agreement procedures by encouraging competent authorities to reach an agreement. Next, well, now that I have spoken about Singapore's economic history and the key thrust of our tax policy, I will now move on to the topic of transformation in tax administration. Let's talk about digitalization in tax administration. Public sector agencies in Singapore have a mantra of being digital to the core and to serve citizens with a heart. In a digitalized age that enables us to leverage technology to transform the way we work, we live, and we play, we also seek to use technology to provide personalized and seamless seamless online experience for our citizens. At the center of our digital transformation journey is actually what we call our trusted digital identity. At the national level, it allows the individual access to services across both public and private sectors. This digital identity is a key enabler of our national digital economy. It makes personalized services possible and in a secure manner. Currently, we have more than 2.5 million users, and over 60% of our residents have onboarded this digital identity. More than 90% of those who have onboarded this have used them at least once a month. As we rely on technology more and more, tax administrations will likewise need to rethink what the customer service should be like in the digital age. In Singapore, we have digitalized the taxpayer experience from end to end, from service to tax filing and payment. More than 98% of individual taxpayers file the tax returns electronically, and 99% of tax payments are by digital means, making tax filing and the tax paying experience a very seamless one. To help taxpayers who may not be so savvy with technology, we developed what we call a chat filing, which allows micro businesses like food vendors and taxi drivers to file their income tax returns using an online chat bot interface. Chat filing, as the name suggests, is a bot designed for conversational filing, and it replaces all the technical jargon with natural language. More than 1,500 taxpayers have used this mode of filing this year, and 98%, a very high percentage, 98% of them were satisfied with their experience. On the compliance front, we have deployed data analytics and risk modeling to identify risky taxpayers for compliance attention. This enables higher risk cases to be detected and resolved in a more efficient manner. And automation has also eliminated quite a lot of our manual efforts. We recognize that digitalization is not an end in itself, but it helps bring about a better tax experience for our community. We will continue to tap on these technologies, work closely with the tax community, and explore new ways to serve taxpayers better. In conclusion, I wish to say that yes, we are in an age of a rapid change. While policymakers are adapting tax policies to shape desired outcomes, tax administrations must continue to maintain a stable core of robust processes to support the tax regime, and at the same time, continually innovate and transform both the mindsets and methods for greater efficiency and effectiveness. It's been my great pleasure to share Singapore's tax policy and administration experience with you, and I look forward to a lively exchange later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chiatin. Let's give her a warm round of applause. Thank you for sharing the Singapore experience. And now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to call onto stage our panelists. We have our first panelist, Dr. Commissioner Omar Mohammed, who is our commissioner in charge of strategy, innovation, and risk management. Dr. Please come and join me on stage. Our second panelist is the Honorable MP for Kitui, Mr. David Mwali-Kamboni. He's also the member of Finance and National Planning Parliamentary Committee, here representing Madam Gladys Wanga, who's the chairman of the National Finance and Planning Committee. Thank you very much, sir. Also representing the business community is Mr. Victor Ogalo, who's the Deputy CEO of KEPSA. Karibu sana and join me here on stage. I think I have called all the panelists, apart from one. Okay, my director is giving me many instructions. She will come and whisper to me. Please come whisper to me what you're saying. I'm sorry if I've missed out on anyone. She'll let me know who I need to call on stage as well. And then I have also Professor Philip Nyinguro, who's the Professor of Political Science and International Relations, University of Nairobi. Professor, I think we saw you. Yes, please join us here on stage. Okay. But to start us off is joining us from Washington is Miss Catherine Baer. I hope I have pronounced your name well, madam, who is the Director of Fiscal Affairs, Department of IMF. And she's going to give us her opening remarks and her reflections on Agenda 2063, the role of taxation in enhancing capital formation in Africa. Madam Catherine, if you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you very well, and you pronounce my name perfectly.
Phew, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm not sure whether you would like me to make my presentation or just comment based on the presentation I sent you. So perhaps you could let me know which approach you prefer for this session. I will hand it over to you to let me know how you would like to proceed, whether just to provide general comments, or I prepared a presentation on some of the outline for the topic of this session. So I'm happy to go quickly through that presentation as well. I leave that up to you to let me know how you prefer to proceed. Thank you. KRA colleagues, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can, please let me know. Very good. Okay, I will, if it's okay with everybody, I will provide some comments based on a presentation that I prepared. And hello?
Okay, Madam Catherine,
Yes,
just give us 2 minutes. Let Dr. Omar finish his opening remarks, then we'll get back to you.
perfect,
So
thank
a
you.
national tax policy gives an indication on the institutional framework for implementing the tax laws. It gives, as I mentioned, the division of labor between the different entities. It is aligned ideally with the national priorities. In the case of Kenya, with Vision 2030, with the medium-term plan and the Agenda 4. So that you don't have a contradiction between the national policy and the national aspirations. So they will all be linked, and it gives that, as I mentioned, an indication of where the country should be going, what the focus should be. Now, why do we need it? There are a number of reasons why we need it, and more specifically for a country like Kenya, middle income economy, I think our GDP per capita is about $1,900. So therefore, there are a number of things that happens with an economy like ours that needs a national tax policy and comparable countries as well. So just to give you some of the examples, number one is that you want to attract investors, and they also need to have consistency in tax policies and predictability. One of the things that underpins and what investors look for is, can I plan my investment? Will it be changed every year? These are some of the considerations. So by getting this overarching policy, you are taking care of that. Even if you tweak on an year on year, then you're not moving away from the general parameters given by the national tax policy. The second one, and very pertinent in our case, is that you will have a very joined up and streamlined incentive framework. So as you know, the tax expenditure is very high in Kenya. Research we have done shows that we may not be looking at the cost benefit analysis. The taxation in Kenya, the main taxes are collected by the national government through KRA, so income tax, pay as you earn, corporation tax, and so on. There are smaller taxes and levies that are also collected by the counties. Into a coherent framework, so that at all levels of government, these are all joined up. The second one is a national tax policy helps in ensuring that we are aligned in our operations as tax administration with the principles of taxation. Some examples include the one the aforementioned predictability, equity, fairness, impact.
that Mr. Gallo is happy about, especially when you talk about simplicity and agility of the tax regime. But before we get to you, Mr. Gallo, I think Madam Catherine Bear, you are ready for us? I think your audio has been sorted.
I can hear you fine right now. I'm wondering
Right.
whether you, could you please let me know whether you will share my slides, or should I share my screen? If you could just let me know that, please.
All right, please go ahead and share your slides. You can share your screen.
One moment, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't see my presentation, so just give me a moment, please.
All right. I think the technical team here is sorting you out. Do you want to give us 2 minutes? We go to the next panelist as we sort out your slides.
Yes, please do.
Okay, there we go. There we go. We can see your slides now, madam.
Yes, is it possible? Great, then the thing is I can't see them, so I will just use my version. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me in this very interesting tax summit with all of the commissioners from the region and many participants from from different stakeholders. It's really my pleasure to be here. I just want to make one small correction. I'm not the director of the Fiscal Affairs Department, but a mere deputy director. And this afternoon, I would like to just say a few remarks on taxation for development and inclusive growth from the point of view of the Fiscal Affairs Department work across countries and including in the region. So let me just get started. Very briefly going through some of these ideas, which we have heard about a lot in the course of today's summit. So we're talking here about development and taxation, with economic development referring to both the quantitative and qualitative improvement in social well-being, including improvement in human capital and reduction in inequality, that is inclusive growth. Promoting economic development is a key challenge in developing countries, and taxation is central to meeting this challenge. There is a complex relationship between taxes and development. Tax capacity, which we have heard about today, is influenced by economic development and structural transformation, that is, transformation away from economic activity and small-scale agriculture toward manufacturing and services, as we heard from our colleague, Deputy Commissioner Chia Chern today. Taxes also provide resources to allocate through the government budget, that is state spending. Tax policy can affect economic growth positively or negatively, depending on its design. So what are the key issues in taxation? The level of taxation, how much to collect, and design principles and mix, that is, how to collect. Let me next talk about, let's go to the issue of the level of taxation. There is no optimal level of taxation, but the general consensus, there is a general consensus on the minimum level. Minimum revenues required to perform essential functions that are conducive to inclusive economic growth are estimated to be 12.8% of GDP, but given the volatility of revenue, the general recommendation is to aim for a tax to GDP ratio of about 15%. And here, my director, Vitor Gaspar, and a group of my colleagues did a cross-country study, many countries, and found that around 15% is the tipping point that leads to higher 15% tax to GDP ratio is the tipping point that leads to higher growth. And that is a very important finding. 17% of GDP is understood to be the minimum required to attain the Millennium Development Goals, and that is a finding of the UN. In other words, improved state capacity, as reflected in a sustained increase in the tax to GDP ratio, leads to higher growth and development. And let me just repeat that because it is so important. Improved state capacity, as reflected in a sustained increase in the tax to GDP ratio, leads to higher growth and development. Now, what is happening in the region in terms of level of taxation? Tax ratios are generally low in low-income developing countries. On the next slide, they are often below 15% in this income group and below the tipping point that I referred to before in some cases. The average, excluding social contributions, tax to GDP ratio is around 25% of GDP in advanced economies. The tax effort in most African countries is considerably below tax capacity, and that is shown in figure 2 below, with the Africa region being the third set of columns there, and you can see the tax capacity as a percent of GDP in the kind of peach column is the lowest across regions. There's been a sustained decrease in the tax ratio in Kenya since fiscal year 2013-14, down to the tipping point, 12.8% in fiscal year 2021, thereby impairing state capacity. So higher tax ratios are needed in Kenya to boost growth and support inclusion through public spending. Let me go to the next slide next set of slides regarding the key principles in guiding practical tax design. And this will certainly be, these will certainly be principles to be kept in mind in designing Kenya's national tax policy. First is efficiency. Taxes per se are distortionary in their impact. An efficient tax design must minimize the distortionary impact. The size of the loss or distortionary impact is usually referred to as deadweight loss by economists. So this distortionary impact or deadweight loss depends on two main factors. The losses are bigger, the more responsive the tax base is to taxation, and the loss increases more than proportionately with the tax rate. From an efficiency perspective, it is best to design a tax system with a broad base to keep rates low to raise a given level of revenue. Distortionary effects of taxation in Kenya has been exacerbated by exclusions from the tax base under both the consumption and the income tax. Let's move to a second guiding key principle, equity. Horizontal equity is about the equal treatment of those similarly placed. Vertical equity is about imposing a higher tax burden on those with a higher ability to pay. So there is a need to focus on progressivity, but there is a conflict between equity and efficiency. Income taxes, particularly the personal income tax, is the main instrument for ensuring progressivity. But there's a need to extend this to relatively immobile tax bases, such as property taxes. Taxes being a means to provide benefits, the conflict is best resolved by implementing a progressive tax system net of benefits, rather than focusing on the progressivity of any one individual tax. Studies relating to the measurement of fiscal incidence in Kenya do indicate that people in the lower 6 deciles of the income distribution are net beneficiaries of taxation and social expenditures, while those at the top 3 deciles are net payers. That is, individually and jointly, taxation and social spending in Kenya are progressive, according to the study of Manda et al. Of 2020. Moving to another important key principle to guide practical tax design is simplicity. Tax laws should be easy to comply with, but difficult to evade. For taxpayers, the tax code should be unambiguous with minimum cost of compliance. For government, the tax administration should be effective in detecting and penalizing non-compliance. Eliminating the compliance gap or reducing it is critical for achieving equity and efficiency. In developing countries, tax compliance is constrained by several factors, including the complexity of the tax laws, limited capacity for enforcement, and informality. Studies in Kenya indicate tax compliance significantly declines with an increase in tax compliance costs, particularly those related to understanding of the existing complex tax laws, frequency of changes in tax rules, and the general cost of meeting tax compliance requirements. And this is discussed in a study by Abdul and colleagues from 2017. That said, advancements in information technology have created new opportunities to deal with complex enforcement problems that help close the tax gap. So how do we, there is a need to resolve some conflicts among these principles. The principles of taxation, equity, efficiency, simplicity, and revenue adequacy are in conflict. Therefore, we need to balance those trade-offs. Balancing requires building a consensus between all the stakeholders on the level, tax mix, design features, and business processes. The challenge for policymakers is to build a consensus regarding a good policy design to promote inclusive growth. Also, over time, the tax system has evolved with creeping inefficiencies, inequity, and low revenue productivity. I'm referring now to the tax system in Kenya. Hence, there is a need for reform. The structural reform of the tax system is a multi-year exercise requiring a medium-term revenue strategy for a sustained increase in revenues based on the consensus developed. My next slide shows that there is a possibility of building tax capacity through a medium-term revenue strategy, which is something the IMF and others are supporting in a number of countries. What is a tax reform, medium-term revenue strategy? It is a revenue strategy for the medium term based on tax system reform, coordinated capacity building, sustained political commitment for this reform, and taking into account the country's revenue and other goals. It is a strategy that is embedded in the wider government strategy for economic and social development, such as the SDGs. It's a high-level roadmap of tax system reform over 4 to 6 years. It has policy, administration, and legal components. It is a country-led and government-owned strategy, and it helps align CD support. Kenya plans to develop an MTRS with the support of the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department in FY 21 and 22. In my last couple of minutes, I'd like to talk a little bit about tax administration to support investment. And this is a very key aspect that we have heard about before, also from the Deputy Commissioner of Inland Revenue. Taxation plays a critical role in creating a predictable and stable investment and trade environment. Clear, coherent policies and legislation are critical, but do not provide tax certainty if it is not accompanied by coherent, fair, and efficient implementation. Let me repeat that because it is so important. Clear, coherent policies and legislation are critical, but do not provide tax certainty if they are not accompanied by coherent, fair, and efficient implementation. So tax administration can be an enabler or a barrier to the development agenda. A key element here is to provide a predictable and stable investment and trading environment. A key element is tax certainty. Tax uncertainty discourages investment and other commercial decisions that can have a significant impact on economic goals. The IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department work through the TADAT assessments and other diagnostics indicates that more needs to be done on the continent to improve tax certainty. What are some of the good revenue administration practices and tax certainty? First, sound, clear, and administrable tax regulations, including on international tax matters. Second, up-to-date and readily available support to taxpayers, including service channel for specialized provision of tax information, interpreting tax legislation fairly through practice notes and public and private rulings, Third, increasing the predictability and consistency of application of rules and procedures. Fourth, building knowledge across different units on cutting-edge issues on inbound investment. And fifth, the timely resolution of disputes and deliberate strategies to shift from dispute litigation to prevention. And my last slide has to do with good revenue administration practices in including tax and customs practices and tax certainty. These also include a timely service delivery, including, for example, providing fast-track treatment for processing refunds for low-risk taxpayers, developing agile customs processes for importation of capital goods. Another element is very important, having a transparency in the administration of incentives, addressing corruption and ensuring high levels of integrity, efficiency, and accountability. Overall, better application of risk assessment to ease compliance burdens for compliant taxpayers while focusing on changing attitudes of the non-compliant. And with this, I would like to say thank you very much and for your time and attention to listening to what are considered to be a framework for a tax and guidelines for good tax policy design and revenue administration to support inclusive growth and development. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Catherine Bear. We appreciate you. And it's on that tax certainty note that I would like to call upon Mr. Victor Gallo, the Deputy CEO of KEPSA. He's also representing the business community. You've heard about tax certainty. You've heard about the national tax policy. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. I think there's a lot to discuss here, and Catherine and was it Omar?
Dr. Omar.
Yeah. Both pointed out the same things. So there's a lot of emphasis on the tenets of a tax policy, predictability, certainty, and reasons for that to give confidence to investors. Assume, for instance, like we had in 2019, trying to promote circular economy, recycling of plastics, and a tax incentive was given. And then the following year, right, that was changed in 2020. So if you had been in, the investor to, making a decision based on the 2019 provisions, and you probably put up a recycling plant, hoping that the incentive will stay for long, and then the next year it's disrupted. You say you really can't make long-term investment, and I think that denies a country big investments. Just the same as our politics. An investor comes in and they can't make 10-year, investment plan because you don't know what will happen in 4 to 5 years. So you are always on the fence. Let's wait and see what will happen. So even for the case of taxation, the frequency and predictability with which we change tax rates or introduce new ones that affect certain budding industries or new areas that are supposed to spur economy, discourages investment. Yes, so that's something we really need to be conscious about, that people make long-term decisions. They would want to make long-term decisions, and long-term investments are what grow a country. But if you make piecemeal, because you do not know what tomorrow holds, then I think we're also using tax policy instead of promoting investment to actually impede the same. So that is why we need a national tax policy. But I forgot your name.
My name is Wageni.
So The question, I think, a very interesting question we should ask is,
Yeah.
despite knowing all the benefits of our national tax policy, and I've been in this discussion since, I think, 2014, hearing about it, agitating for it. 7 years later, we are still talking about it. I think we seem to be ripe for it right now. But I think the fact that it has taken us a long time should raise another question. Why has it been so difficult for a country like Kenya, knowing all the benefits of our national tax policy, to come up with one, right? Even 20, 30 years back, why haven't we considered that? So there are some underlying reasons beyond economic reasons.
Maybe I pick up on your question and I request our Member of Parliament, Mr. Boni, who is also a member of the National Finance and Planning Parliamentary Committee. So what Mr. Victor Ogallo is asking, why has it taken Kenya so long to adapt and implement a national tax policy?
Thank you, Madam Wageni. I also wonder why it has taken that long really to come up with the tax policy. Because on the part of Parliament, the policies are not yet reached Parliament. I think it has been the works for the longest in Treasury. But as other panelists have said, this policy is very important. Having been in the Finance Committee for the last 4 years, and I'm one person who really don't advocate high taxes. I'm an economist by profession, part of being a member of Parliament. You know, high taxes, at the end of the day, they resort to the discouraging investment and economic growth to some extent. Because even now, when you look at what is happening in the fuel prices, 40% of the prices. Fuel is one of the major components when it comes to manufacturing. So to some extent, the cost of living is going up. Our competitiveness in the local market, in the national, regional market, and the national market is also going to be affected. So I think that question can be answered very well by Treasury. And I thought the PS Treasury was supposed to be here so that he can be able to tell us why it has taken this country that long to come up with the policy. Us as members of Parliament, we are ready to pass it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate that note that you're ready to pass it. It seems the business community and Kerry is very much behind it. Mr. Ogallo, you want to add something? Yes, very quickly, please.
Yeah, so I think that is a controversy we need to resolve.
Okay.
The political economy around a very important policy like national tax policy.
Yeah.
The second thing is we have sectoral policies that have different contradicting laws. So maybe on the one hand, you want to promote agriculture, so you have a policy around promoting food security. But on the other hand, you have tax laws around movement of food that actually contradict the national objective of food security. Could also happen in energy. You want a low-cost energy. As a policy, you come up, with that intention. What we practice on the other end, in the energy sector, then comes to contradict. So I think a national tax policy would be able to look at all the existing policies across different sectors, across different programs, and look for contradictions, overlaps, align that together. Look at the incentive framework that in most cases could actually be leakages instead of promoting actual investment. So and then again, let me point out that from the statistics Catherine gave, I think KRA should not, should have a pat on its back for having raised 16% of our GDP in tax revenue. I think We keep hearing Kenya has not met its target year in, year out, I think for the last 8, 7 years. But if you look at what they've been collecting as a percent of our, of our GDP, and talking about what is optimal, all right? I think the ranges they've been collecting in terms of share of GDP has been optimal for a country like Kenya. So I wouldn't really, say, I think the main challenge might be they have higher targets than would be optimal for a country like Kenya. But in terms of, have they been raising enough? What's optimal? Even if you look at the average for Africa, 30 countries in Africa was looking at their average, was coming to 16.6%. And knowing that we are a low developed, a low income country, that is sufficient. We need to go to, how can the policy now help KRA to bring in the untaxed population, the untaxed businesses, the ground black economy, so that the conversation we should be having is, now that we have a bigger cake, a bigger number within the bracket of tax, can we now start a discussion around lowering the top rates, right? Either at individual level in terms of income or at corporate level. That conversation we'll be able to have if the corporate strategy for KRA is able to net in more. At least we should be having a conversation around tax burden, how to reduce that.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think our Commissioner General put it rightly this morning when he said we only collect what is allowable by our laws, and we do not collect a shilling more or a shilling less. We just collect what needs to be collected. But I want to bring in Professor. Oh, yes, our Member of Parliament. Yes, a quick comment, please, before I bring in Professor.
I think he raised a very, very fundamental issue on our tax to GDP, tax revenue to GDP. Tax to GDP has been going down since 2013. 2013, it was 22%. Now it's around 17%. What we need to ask ourselves, why has it been going down? We need to know that 3 major sectors, manufacturing, banking, insurance, and ICT, which actually contributes 15.5%, contribute 52% of tax revenue. The issue is these sectors are overtaxed. So what we need to do as a country is to look at other sectors and see how they can be taxed, because over taxation, as I said, is going to resort to lower taxes. You go to borders, our borders, Tanzania, Uganda, for example. Most of the cigarettes, for example, and beers are being smuggled from Uganda, right? And therefore, we are actually losing revenue. And that's how I'm saying over taxation, which will result to lower tax revenue. Thank you very much.
I think I'd like Commissioner Omar to comment on that one. He has touched on some very sensitive areas. Dr. Omar. He has touched on some very sensitive areas. Give us your opinion, please.
Okay. No, there's no problem with I mean, the comment is okay. What I wanted to say is that yes, under difficult circumstances, if you look at last year, the collection was 1.669 of an economy which is about 10 trillion. That's almost 17%. So that for me is a performance under the circumstance and a growth compared to the previous year. Now, of course, there's been attempts to introduce policies that expand the tax base. A key example is the digital economy taxation. both the income side, the DST, as well as the consumption side. There's been an introduction of voluntary disclosure program so that people are able to come in and therefore declare what they have not declared previously. So, and if you look at the current strategic plan of KRA, tax-based expansion, simplicity, the issue of using data to apply data analytics are key planks. So I'm very confident that with the various streams that have been introduced over time, that expansion will be there. Of course, there are sectors that our economy, if you look at the structure of our economy, the informality that the IMF, I think Catherine mentioned the African context, informality is there. We're currently doing research on informal sector. The structure is such that agriculture, a key proportion of the economy, is largely subsistence and informal. Those ones are there, but as value addition kicks in and more enterprises are formalized, then you'll see them coming into the net. So by any standard, I think about 17%, I agree with the representative from KEPSA, the deputy CEO, is quite good. I think for an economy like ours, of course, the ideal, they normally state about 20%, but under the circumstance and the pandemic, the measures, tax relief measures that were introduced during the last financial year, despite all that, we've seen a reasonable success and a growth compared to the previous year.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Omar. Speaking of growth, please allow me to bring in Professor Nying'oro, who is our Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Nairobi. Professor, Agenda 2063, the role of taxation in enhancing capital formation in Africa. What is your comment around that?
First of all, let me really thank the Commissioner General of KRA for inviting me here. I also think I should also observe that as a district officer in Lipoi in the late 1980s, I participated in tax collection because the customs officer was actually a member of my district, my divisional security committee. And also, I would also like to acknowledge, I would also like to pick up from where Mr. Dr. Gallo, I think he mentioned something about political economy. And I think I really liked that because that defined my relevance here. Because as a professor of political science, international relations, one of the major areas that I deal in is political economy and international political economy. And so I am very delighted to be here. So I will take more or less a dimension of going towards political economy nationally and also political economy internationally. Because one, when we talk about national tax policy, I think a successful national tax policy would depend very much on the appreciation of variables at three major levels. Variables at the national level, that is in Kenya, the economy and the politics and the social variables. And then we have to raise it to another level of regional, and I think again that is where the African dimension comes in. And then lastly, and very, very important, because we live in a globalist world, we live in an interdependent world. The international economic governance system. For instance, when we talk about these levels, we need to identify the challenges and opportunities for the taxman, challenges and opportunities in the collection of taxes and ensuring compliance, because when you want to ensure tax compliance, there may be challenges which do not only arise within Kenya or within the nation itself, but from outside also. So allow me to concentrate much more on the global political economy, the global sector, because I see the distinguished speaker on the Deputy Director of Fiscal Affairs. He has kept on talking about less developed countries, that there appear to be some unique challenges that the less developed countries do encounter in their tax policies. So I would like to say that Africa in general contains a large number of these less developed countries, though there have been some revisions of our status here and there, South Africa, Kenya, lower middle income, but we are largely within that dichotomy of the global economy, the dichotomy that places us within the area of the low developed countries, the less developed countries. So I would like to say here that the institutions that govern global economies are very important for us here. You take, for instance, the WTO. Yeah. I believe very much that when we are preparing the national tax policy, I think WTO will have to be taken very seriously, because the principles of WTO, for instance, the principles that discourage subsidies, and we are talking here that we are in a global economy which is actually divided into the core. There are countries at the core, the developed countries, the OECD countries and the rest. And then you have the periphery. I'm not want to use it very in a very negative way, because we have to be optimistic that we face challenges which are quite different from the others. And there are some radical scholars. I know nowadays we don't want to hear about radicalness, don't want to hear about Marxism. Even my good professor, when I say the word who taught us, would not nowadays, I believe, don't want to hear about Marxism. But we still have to interrogate this, that we are in a global economy where institutions that govern global economy, they are actually managed either by this design or by accident by the same OECD countries. And there's some mismatch here. Because, for instance, countries which the deputy director called less developed countries are being encouraged by the international economic regimes to remove subsidies. Now, subsidies, whether you have subsidies, whether you give your citizens subsidies or don't give them, has got an implication for taxation, the level of taxes that you can actually have. Then the second point is liberalization. I want to believe that taxation policies in Kenya state control, state intervention in the economy was still allowed, were different from now, particularly from the 1980s, when we had the structural adjustment program regimes. so the liberalization regimes are actually affecting our taxes very much. For instance, scholars like quoting fellow scholars like George Ate. I think we most of us remember him when he assessed the performance of structural adjustment programs in Africa, especially Ghana. And I think his findings were praised almost by everyone, including the IMF and the World Bank. Yeah, that we need to develop our tax policies with appreciation of the fact that we are living in an era of economic liberalization. Why do I say this? Because when you liberalize, like the whole world now, we are now on liberalization. Even China, which used to be, is now liberalizing its economy, at least in as far as its interaction with the whole world is concerned. The SAP regime has got implications for domestic capital formation, because it appears to it has brought in competition from outside. We are being told to pare down the boundaries to allow foreign investors to come in, which is very good because, as we know, China has developed faster, particularly since the 1980s. Fragile. We need to be very, very careful because large companies, large multinational companies come and they outcompete the local ones. And I do believe that when the local private sector will grow to surpass the private sector, the foreign private sector dimension, I think we'll have a larger tax base than before.
All right.
Yes, and then also, you know, I'm a professor. I sometimes have got a problem in managing my time. Bilateral agreements. Yeah.
The last point, Professor.
Yes.
Yes.
The very last one.
Yes.
Bilateral agreements. For instance, the bilateral agreements that less developed countries enter into also have got an impact on the tax, on our taxation policies. Why? Because we tend to have bilateral agreements, despite the fact that we have multilateral schemes like East African Community and others. But we value more bilateral agreements with those countries which are outside, who give us aid and all that. So let me end here. Maybe you can also invite me next year so that I complete what I had.
Thank you very much, Professor. We appreciate. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, we have to really wrap up plenary 3. However, I'm informed that for all your questions on the online community, there is a panel of experts who are responding to your questions, and so they're not going unanswered. Gentlemen, please allow me to request you to give us your closing remarks. Perhaps we can start with the ladies or who are joining us online. Madam Chiatan, if you're still with us from Singapore, please give us your quick closing remarks. There you are.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to say that it's been a pleasure for me to be here and also to hear about the views from your colleagues. And yeah, we were talking about bilateral versus multilateralism. Indeed, there's a lot more international cooperation. And we look forward to working with Kenya and other countries to ensure that international tax rules can be fair and inclusive for all involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, and please pass our greetings to all the Singaporeans. Joining us from Washington is Ms. Catherine Bear, the Deputy Director of Fiscal Affairs at IMF. Please give us your closing remarks if you can hear me. Please unmute. Ms. Catherine? All right. So perhaps we can go to the panel as we sort out Ms. Catherine. And I'm going to ask Mr. Ogallo, please give us your closing remarks. I know Professor has intimated many things you'd like to comment on, but please keep it short.
I think you made it clear.
Yeah.
And follow-on discussions around the points we have raised here towards developing the national tax policy would be very, very important. But in terms of my closing remarks, I think one thing we forgot to bring into the discussion is we're looking at tax, so we're looking at the, the income, but we need to interrogate, and I think this is where we need Parliament to step up and take its oversight role. We need to interrogate the expenditure side. The expenditure side, so you see, treasury planning, do the planning, estimate how much will we need to meet our required expenditures.
Our national expenditure?
Yeah.
What do you mean expenditure?
Yes,
Okay.
national expenditure. But rarely do we come back to, give a report on the national expenditure.
Okay.
And productivity of the different activities that were implemented. All right. I think if we are able to, control and be frugal about our national expenditure, you might actually find that we are beginning then to build a surplus from the tax revenue. Because I imagine that if we manage our expenditures well, then our tax revenue might actually exceed our national expenditure. And progressively, we should be able to build a surplus. Same case as in Singapore. I think they have a policy of surplus. Every administration that comes in has to leave back a surplus with which the incoming administration starts from. You do not start from a negative. Right? Okay. You don't start from a burden. So every administration has a responsibility to work very hard on its expenditure side, raise the income, build a war chest of surplus, so that in events like a pandemic that we just had, we are able to take care of ourselves as a country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ogallo. I think I want our Honorable MP for Kitui Central and a member of the Finance and National Planning Parliamentary Committee, Honorable David Malika, to respond to the reporting part as he gives us his final comments.
I think he has raised a very, very important issue on the expenditure side. And, there have been this M&E system which has been going on and being developed by the government. And I think that's a very important tool whereby you can be able to monitor projects, at what stage they are, how much money has been spent, and that way we can be able to really to look at the expenditure side. But on the part of the government, I think is very important. We look at we start seriously fiscal consolidation and reduction of government wastage in the expenditures, so that at least at the end of the day we can have surplus. Because I believe, and everyone knows that there's a lot of wastage, maybe 30% of what we collect goes to wastage. Okay. So, I mean,
what is your committee doing about it?
Well, the committee has been pushing for this M&E framework so that it can be able to start operational. Coming back to the national tax policy, I think that's very important. because this idea of changing tax every year, at times you have this tax before even it settles. There's a change of the same tax. Maybe you reduce it or increase it. That's you don't. Investors want a regime which is stable, and if you can have review of tax after every 5 years, to me it's important. And I said that we have to look at the economics of scale, not overtaxing some items. But if you lower tax, for example, if you lower tax on milk, for example, and you have increased consumption, then you can even generate more taxes than having the tax which is higher. I'll tell you what is happening with the fuel prices, not taxes. Actually, it's taxes partly, but increase was not taxes. It's something different. It's lack of what we call petroleum development levy, which was exhausted. But the prices have gone up. People are suffering. You go to border Uganda, you hear people are going across to fuel. Therefore, we are also losing tax revenue to some extent. So I think as a country, we need to push Treasury to bring this national tax policy. As Parliament, we are waiting for it, and they should do it as quickly as possible, because come February, even to get a quorum in Parliament is going to be a problem, because all of us will be seeking for our re-election.
Dr. Umar, you have had the pressure is on. We have until February.
Yeah.
What are your closing remarks, especially regards the national tax policy?
Okay, two things. We've talked about the rationale and the benefits of national tax policy. Now, that is going to be benefit from the input of the various stakeholders. So the business management organizations, the various professional associations, and the potential is that the implementation will be easier when you have been involved in developing and crafting the national tax policy. It's being co-created with other stakeholders, not just the government. So that point is very important. And once you've been involved in the creation and crafting of a policy, then it's likely to be implemented. The second one is, as a country, we have the medium-term expenditure framework, the MTEF. So for the first time, we are developing the medium-term revenue strategy, the counterpart to the expenditure side. So those two, national tax policy and medium-term revenue strategy, will likely help in terms of predictability. So I think those are my two closing remarks. We've discussed the rest. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let us appreciate our panelists and our keynote speaker who was joining us virtually, and our online community. We appreciate your time. Gentlemen, please, may I request that we come to the fore and take a group photo for plenary 3, so that we can be able to make, yes, all right. All right. Okay. With our Commissioner General, of course, and our KRA Board Chair, Ambassador Francis Mulara. Please join plenary 3 for a group photo. Great discussions that we have had there. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and please take your greetings to your communities once you get back. Ladies and gentlemen, day one of the annual tax summit has come to a fantastic, fruitful close. Great discussions we've had today. We hope the conversations can continue online. Remember to visit us, summit.kra.go.ke. You will get all the material regarding this summit. Great conversations. We shall continue tomorrow, the 14th of October, which will be our day 2 of our summit. We begin promptly at 9 a.m. East African time. And tomorrow, we'll be discussing enhancing service delivery in tax administration. We'll be discussing the role of tax administration in fighting illicit financial flows, IFFs, the African experience. We'll also be discussing our third and final plenary will be the impact of African continental free trade area. Great discussions you do not want to miss. You want to book your seats for tomorrow's discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have come to the end of our tax summit for day 1. Why don't we give ourselves a round of applause? You've been great, right? And thank you very much. You are now free to leave at your own pleasure. Asanteni.